She's not one of us. On Thanksgiving. In front of 23 people. My husband was among them. He did not look up from his plate. She didn't whisper it. She didn't say it to someone privately in the kitchen. She stood up and tapped her wine glass with a dessert fork. It looked like she was about to make a toast. Instead, she delivered a speech she had clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. I've been thinking a lot about this family's future, Victoria began. She smoothed the front of her cashmere sweater. The cream one. The one she always wore when she wanted to look like a certain kind of woman. The kind who only says things she doesn't mean in the kindest possible way. And I've come to a decision about the family trust. My stomach dropped. Not because I was surprised. I'd been expecting something. But I'd expected it in a lawyer's office or in a hallway. Maybe over the phone. Victoria had that clipped, careful tone. The one she used when she was about to say something devastating. She'd make it sound like concern. Not here. Not at Thanksgiving. Not in front of her sister-in-law, Margaret. Not in front of her bridge club friends, Helen and Dorothy. Not in front of cousin Nathan. He was already on his 4th glass of wine. He had the emotional awareness of a potted fern. By my late husband to protect our family's legacy. Victoria paused, then continued. After consulting with our attorney, I've decided something. It's best to limit the beneficiaries to blood members only. She paused. She looked at me. Mia, dear, this isn't personal. You understand. 23 heads turned toward me. Some with pity. Some with relief that it wasn't them. Nathan took another sip of wine. He looked like he was watching a movie he hadn't bought tickets for. My husband Aaron was studying his green beans. He had the intensity of a man trying to discover a new vegetable species. He pushed one to the edge of his plate, then pushed it back. A man fully committed to doing nothing. Margaret held her fork in midair. She hadn't taken a bite in 30 seconds. Helen looked at Dorothy. Dorothy looked at her napkin. Nathan reached for the breadbasket. Because Nathan always reached for the breadbasket. The candles flickered. The centerpiece cast long shadows across the linen tablecloth. Outside, it was getting dark. That makes everything inside feel smaller. More exposed. I was 29 years old. I had been married to Aaron for 5 years. And I was sitting at a table my mother-in-law had set with her fine china. The hand-painted china. The good stuff. The plates she used to remind people that she came from money. The way some people use business cards. I was being told that I was not part of the family. The family I had cooked for every Sunday for 4 years. The family I had driven 3 hours to visit when Victoria had her hip replaced. The family whose business I had been quietly helping run for the past 2 years. Victoria took credit. Aaron looked the other way. Not from the right background, Victoria had once said to Aaron's aunt. She thought I wasn't listening. I was in the next room. The walls in old houses are never as thick as the people inside them think. What Victoria meant by not from the right background was simple. My parents didn't own a vacation home. That my mother worked as a school secretary for 31 years. He came home every night smelling like cardboard and engine oil and love. My parents were not members of the country club. My parents did not summer anywhere. My parents used coupons and thought that was smart, not shameful. My mother used to say it best. The only people embarrassed by coupons are the ones who've never had to count. I loved my parents. I loved them most fiercely when Victoria tried to make me ashamed of them. My father once told me something I never forgot. We were sitting on the front porch. He'd just come home from a 12-hour shift. His boots were untied. His coffee was cold. He said, "Mia, never apologize for where you come from. Apologize for where you stop." He didn't say it to be philosophical. He said it because the neighbor's kid had made fun of our mailbox. It was rusted. It leaned a little to the left. Dad never fixed it. He said the lean gave it character. Mom agreed. She said the mailbox was a lot like our family. A little crooked. Completely reliable. I didn't say a word. The imported china was out. The linen napkins. The centerpiece Victoria had ordered from a florist. She mentioned the name 3 times. So everyone would know it was expensive. Not because I was weak. Not because I was scared. Because I had a letter in my purse. And I was waiting for the right moment. Let me go back. I met Aaron Whitfield at a fundraiser for the local children's hospital. I was 23. He was 26. I was there because I'd volunteered for the event committee. He was there because his family had donated a wing. Not a room. A wing. The Whitfield Family Pediatric Care Wing. It had a plaque. It had a dedication ceremony. Victoria had given a speech and cried on cue. She'd practiced her emotions in front of the same mirror, the one she'd later used to rehearse Thanksgiving speeches. Aaron found me at the drink table. I was pouring sparkling water. I was trying to look like I belonged. The gift bags at that event cost more than my car payment. You're the one who organized the silent auction, he said. How did you know? Because you're the only person here who looks like they actually did something. Not just writing a check. I liked that. I liked that he noticed effort. Most people at that fundraiser noticed checkbooks. Aaron noticed hands. The ones that actually did the work. We talked for an hour. He asked me about my family, not the way people usually ask, not the polite scan. He wanted the real version. I told him about Dad's truck, about Mom's school, about the mailbox that leaned to the left. He laughed. Not at us. With us. That's how I knew he was different. Or at least, that's what I thought. He told me about his father, about the warehouse, about the loading dock and the coffee. He spoke about James the way people speak about a campfire. One they're still warming their hands over. I didn't know then that James was already gone. Aaron mentioned it later. Casually, the way people mention things they haven't processed. He passed a few years back. That was all he said. But his voice changed when he said it. Just slightly. The way a radio signal fades for 1 second, then comes back. Aaron was different from his mother. Or at least, that's what I believed for a very long time. He was warm. He was funny. He joked about his family's wealth in a self-deprecating way. It made you think he didn't take it seriously. He once joked about the family trust, called it a spreadsheet with a legal department and a superiority complex. I laughed. He laughed. We both laughed at the thing that would later try to destroy us. Or rather, destroy me. The first time Aaron brought me home, Victoria answered the door in pearls. Not the kind of pearls you wear to a dinner party. The kind of pearls you wear to a door you plan to close in someone's face. She looked at my shoes first, then my handbag, then my face. In that order. Aaron's told me so much about you, she said, which was code for, Aaron's told me enough for me to decide you're temporary. She offered me a glass of water. Not wine. Water. In a glass that was noticeably smaller than the ones on the dining table. I noticed. Mom would have noticed. Dad would have just been thirsty. The foyer smelled like lilies. Not real ones. A cannel. The kind that costs more than dinner. The walls were covered in framed photographs. Family portraits. Vacation snapshots. A professional photo of Victoria at a charity gala. She was shaking hands with someone important. I didn't recognize who. But the frame was the largest on the wall. James was in the kitchen. He came out wiping his hands on a dish towel. He wore an apron that said World's Oakest Cook. He shook my hand with both of his. Welcome. I hope you like burnt risotto. It's my specialty. I liked him instantly. I liked him the way you like people who don't need you to be impressed by them. He asked me about my work, not the way Victoria asked. Hers was a polite scan for income level and social standing. He asked the way someone asks when they actually want to know. Legal services for families who can't afford lawyers? He repeated. That's real work. That's the kind of thing that actually matters. He said it in front of Victoria. She changed the subject. She talked about curtains she'd ordered from a catalog in Connecticut. I noticed that, and I filed it away the way my mother had taught me quietly, and for later. Mom had a system. She never wrote things down. She never kept lists. She just remembered everything. Every slight, every kindness, every promise made and every promise broken. She filed it all in her mind. Organized by person, sorted by severity. Ready for retrieval at the exact right moment. Dad used to joke that Mom had the memory of an elephant. Mom would say she had the patience of one. Elephants don't forget, and they don't rush. I inherited that filing system. Not because she taught it, because I watched her. The way daughters watch. Quietly. Constantly. Learning everything nobody thinks they're teaching. Aaron never talked about his father's death. Not really. He'd mention him sometimes. A story about fishing. A joke James used to tell, but always in that careful, rehearsed way. The kind that tells you someone has practiced not feeling. He said something quiet. Dad was the only person in this family who didn't need to be in charge. When he died, that kind of just evaporated. I didn't understand then what he was telling me. That without James, there was a vacuum. And Victoria rushed in to fill it. The way water fills a crack, completely, immediately, and without asking permission. Aaron didn't resist her. He didn't fight. He just receded, like a shoreline that gives way an inch at a time. One day you look up and realize the beach is half the size it used to be. We married when I was 24. Small ceremony. My choice. Victoria wanted a 300-person event at a country club. I wanted my parents' backyard. And a string quartet my friend knew from community orchestra. It'll look like a block party, Victoria said when Aaron told her. It'll look like us, I said. Victoria smiled. The kind of smile that files things away for later use. She showed up in a white dress. Not ivory. Not cream. White. Full length. Sleeveless. For this exact moment. It was deliberate. She wore heels that sank into the lawn. She didn't care. The sinking was the point. Everyone had to watch her navigate the grass. With a corsage that matched the bridal bouquet. A little too closely to be coincidence. My mother noticed first. She was standing behind the dessert table. She'd been arranging cupcakes she'd spent 2 days decorating by hand. She looked at Victoria. She looked at the dress. She put down the piping bag very carefully. The way you put down something you're tempted to use as a weapon. Then she walked over to me. She leaned in and whispered, "Don't let her steal a single second of this day. She's wearing that dress because she wants a reaction. Don't give it to her. Just be happy." She can't stand happy. I looked at Victoria. She was smiling and greeting guests in my parents' backyard. She acted like she was hosting an event at a venue she didn't approve of. I looked at my mom. She stood in the kitchen doorway. She wore the lavender dress she'd bought on sale and altered herself. And I decided that Mom was right. About the dress. About the reaction. About happy. And eventually, about everything else. The ceremony was small. 62 people. My aunt played guitar. She only knew 4 songs. But she played them with such conviction that nobody noticed the short set list. Dad walked me down the aisle. He wore the suit he'd bought for his own wedding 30 years ago. It still fit. Mom had let out the waist a 1/4 inch. She didn't tell him. He didn't ask. That's the kind of marriage they had. When Dad handed me off to Aaron, he shook Aaron's hand. Firm grip. Steady eyes. He didn't say a single word. He didn't have to. Everything was in the grip. The warning. The blessing. The promise. All of it. The vows were simple. I wrote mine on an index card. Aaron memorized his. He stumbled once. On the word always. I didn't read into it then. Maybe I should have. The reception was perfect. Mom's cupcakes. Dad's playlist. My cousin's terrible toast. He mentioned my childhood hamster 3 times. Nobody understood why, including me. But everyone laughed. That's all that mattered. Victoria sat at a table near the back. She smiled when people looked at her. She stopped smiling when they didn't. The first 2 years were manageable. Victoria was present but predictable. Sunday dinners where she'd comment on my cooking. She had the precision of a restaurant critic, one who'd already decided to give 1 star before the food arrived. This is interesting. Did you add something to the sauce? It tastes different. Not bad, just different. Different from Victoria meant the same thing as wrong, just with better posture. She had a talent for disguising cruelty as consideration. Every insult came gift-wrapped in a compliment. Every dismissal was preceded by a touch on the arm. That concerned head tilt made you feel like the problem was your sensitivity. Not her words. "I'm only saying this because I care," she'd begin. You knew what followed would be something awful. Something nobody who cared would ever say. She commented on my clothes. "That color is very brave on you." My hair. "Did you do something?" "It looks relaxed." My career choice. I worked at a nonprofit. It helped low-income families access legal services. I made $43,000 a year. I came home exhausted and proud. Victoria referred to my job as Mia's little project, the way you'd describe a child's lemonade stand. It's sweet that she's passionate, Victoria told Aaron's aunt at Easter dinner. I was carrying dishes from the kitchen. I heard it because I was meant to hear it. Victoria never said things by accident. Everything she said was on purpose. Even the things she whispered, especially the things she whispered. I just hope she doesn't expect it to replace a real career. A real career. From a woman who hadn't worked a day in her life. My mother had worked for 37 years at the same school. She would have had a few thoughts about what constitutes a real career. But Mom didn't say them. Not yet. She just listened. Things her entire life. Neatly. Patiently. She understood something. Information is only valuable when you use it at the right time. Victoria's husband, Aaron's father James, had built the family wealth. It came through a chain of regional medical supply companies. James did the work. Victoria took the bows. James built the business from a single warehouse and a borrowed truck. Victoria built the narrative. She said it was always a family enterprise, that her guidance and connections had been instrumental, that the Whitfield name carried weight, because she carried it the loudest. James died 4 years before I married Aaron. Heart failure. Quick and unexpected. He was 61. The funeral was standing room. 300 people. Warehouse workers. Truck drivers. Vendors he'd known for decades. A woman from accounting who'd worked for James since the early days. Back when the company was 2 guys and a rented loading dock, she cried the hardest. Victoria noticed. She did not approve. Everyone who knew James said the same thing. In that family. He remembered names. He asked questions. He made people feel like they belonged. Aaron told me that James knew every employee by first name. All 47 of them. He knew their kids' names. He knew their birthdays. He sent handwritten cards. Not printed. Not from an assistant. Handwritten. In that same careful print he used for everything. Margaret once told me that James had a sign in his office. It said, "The business exists to serve people," not the other way around. Victoria had it removed 2 weeks after the funeral. Aaron told me once that his father used to sit in the warehouse after hours. Not working. Just thinking. He'd sit on the loading dock with a cup of coffee. He'd watch the trucks come and go. He said it reminded him of how it all started. "What did your mother do during those evenings?" I asked. Aaron paused. She went to dinner parties. That told me everything I needed to know about who built what in that family. Aaron had one more story about James. The one he told me on our 2nd anniversary, on our own porch. It was late. The street was quiet. Dad used to say that a business is like a garden. You plant it, you water it, you wait. And the thing that matters most is the soil, not the flowers. What did he mean by the soil? I asked. The people. The people are the soil. I never forgot that. It became the foundation of everything I built later. The nonprofit, the legal services, the second office, all of it. Soil first, flowers later. Victoria never understood that metaphor. She only saw flowers. She only wanted flowers. The bigger, the better. And when they wilted, she blamed the garden. When James died, Victoria became the sole trustee of the Whitfield Family Trust. It held the family's investments, real estate, and business interests. It was worth somewhere between $11 and $13 million. That depended on the market. She controlled everything. And she wanted everyone to know it. "I'm the steward of this family's future," she'd say. Usually at holiday dinners. Usually after her 2nd glass of Sauvignon Blanc. Usually while looking at me like I was a typo in an otherwise flawless document. Year 3. Things changed. It didn't happen overnight. It happened the way rest happens. Slowly. Steadily. In places you don't think to check. The first sign was the Sunday dinners. They got longer. Not because the conversations improved, because Victoria started using them as board meetings. She'd bring up the business between courses. She'd mention numbers, not specific ones, just enough to remind you that she controlled them. "The portfolio is performing well. I've made some adjustments to the accounts. Nothing to worry about." When someone says nothing to worry about that often, you should worry. Aaron started spending more time at the family office. He'd been hired to manage operations after his father died. That mostly meant he signed paperwork Victoria put in front of him. He attended meetings she scheduled. "Mom handles the finances," he told me. "She's been doing it since Dad died." She knows what she's doing. He genuinely didn't notice. Victoria wasn't just handling the finances. She was handling everything. She was doing it the way she did everything else, with absolute control and zero transparency. I started seeing it in small ways. Aaron would come home confused about a meeting that didn't happen. It was on his calendar, though. Invoices would arrive for services nobody remembered approving. Victoria would explain things with that same calm, condescending patience. "I took care of it, dear. You don't need to worry." She said that to Aaron, but she was looking at me. At the same time, I was doing more and more for the family business. Nobody had even asked. It started small, helping Aaron draft correspondence, organizing vendor files, reviewing contracts. My paralegal training turned out to be exactly what the business needed. I'd come home from my real job at the nonprofit. I'd eat dinner. Then I'd sit at the desk in our spare bedroom, the one Aaron called the homework room. I'd work until midnight, sometimes later, that hadn't been touched since James died. The filing system was a disaster. Not James's system, Victoria's. She had reorganized everything after the funeral. She moved documents. She relabeled folders. She created new categories that made no sense, unless you understood that the categories weren't for organizing. They were for hiding. I didn't realize that yet. Not at the time. I just thought she was disorganized. I was wrong. She was extremely organized, just not in the direction I expected. Victoria had called my work Mia's Little Project. By the middle of year 3, I was running compliance for the company. I caught a billing error. It would have cost $87,000. I reorganized the vendor agreement system. It was actually searchable now for the first time in 6 years. I flagged a contract renewal that contained a clause change nobody had noticed. It would have given a distributor exclusive regional rights for a decade. Victoria never thanked me. Not once. Aaron mentioned my contributions at a family board meeting. Victoria responded, "That's sweet. Maybe we should get Mia a little gift card for her trouble." A gift card. For saving the company $87,000. Aaron laughed like it was a joke. I don't think it was. I didn't question it. I had no reason to. I trusted Aaron. And Aaron trusted Victoria, which meant I trusted Victoria by proxy. The most dangerous kind of trust. It requires 2 failures to finally break. But then something happened. I was helping Aaron organize his home office. He'd asked me to sort through some files that had piled up over the past year. That's when I found a letter. It wasn't addressed to Aaron. It was addressed to me. From the estate attorney. A man named Philip Garrett. The envelope was sealed. It had been placed inside a folder marked Tax Documents Archive. Nobody opens that kind of folder voluntarily, which is probably why Victoria put it there. I recognized her handwriting on the folder label, the same precise, slightly pointed cursive. She used it for everything. Thank you cards. I opened it. The letter was dated 4 months earlier. Dear Mrs. Whitfield, I am writing to inform you of the following. During the annual trust audit, our firm has found irregularities. This audit is required under the trust's governance provisions. They are in the disbursement records of the Whitfield Family Trust. Specifically, we have documented transfers totaling approximately $1. 4 millions. They span the past 3 years. These went to accounts not authorized under the trust's original charter. These transfers appear to have been initiated by the sole trustee. That is Mrs. Victoria Whitfield. Under the terms of Mr. James Whitfield's trust, you were named as a beneficiary. You, Mia Whitfield, have a designated allocation. It is upon your 5th wedding anniversary. This designation has not been communicated to you as required. We strongly recommend that you retain independent legal counsel. This is to protect your interests. Respectfully, Philip Garrett, Esquire. Garrett and Associates. I read it twice. Then I read it a 3rd time. I put it down. I picked it up again. I read it a 4th time. Because the first 3 felt like a dream. The kind where you open a door in your own house and find a room you never knew existed. My hands were shaking so badly that the paper rattled against the desk. The room felt different. The air felt thinner. Every object on Aaron's desk looked the same. But nothing was. I looked at the folder she'd hidden it in. Tax Documents Archive. Such a boring label. That was the genius of it. Victoria understood something. The best hiding places are the ones nobody wants to look in. $1.4 million. Victoria had been moving that amount out of the trust for 3 years, into accounts nobody authorized. And she had hidden this letter from me. She buried it in a tax folder in my husband's office. She knew I would never look. She knew Aaron would never look. Nobody would open that kind of folder. Not unless they had nothing better to do. Victoria had made very sure that I was never seen as someone important. I called my mother. Mom, I need to come over. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there. Mia, what happened? Mom, I'm fine. I just found something, and I need you to help me figure out what to do with it. Silence. Then carefully, bring everything. I'll put the kettle on. My mother did not panic. She did not gasp. She read the letter at the kitchen table. She put it down. She took off her reading glasses, and she said, "She's been stealing." Yes, and she hid this from you. She hid it in Aaron's office, in a folder she labeled herself. Mom was quiet for a long time. Then, do you know what your father would say? What? He'd say, "The best thing about a thief? They always think they're the smartest person in the room. And the best part about that is when they find out they're not." I almost smiled. Dad had been gone for 2 years. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and merciless. 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. He spent the last week at home. In the recliner Mom had bought him for his 60th birthday. He watched baseball. He ate vanilla pudding. He held Mom's hand every single evening. He didn't complain. Not once. The nurses said they'd never seen anything like it. A man that sick, that quiet, that completely at peace. Mom said he wasn't at peace. He was just stubborn. Your father decided he wouldn't waste his last days feeling sorry for himself. So he didn't. That sounded right. That sounded like Dad. The man who drove through a blizzard to deliver packages on time, because someone was waiting for them. But even now, even from wherever he was, his voice still anchored me. Mom looked at me. "What do you want to do?" "I want to wait." "For what?" "For Thanksgiving." Mom raised an eyebrow. Then slowly she smiled. "Good girl." I contacted Philip Garrett the next morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop. I didn't want to call from home. I didn't want to call from work. I needed neutral ground. Somewhere that smelled like espresso and didn't belong to anyone. I dialed the number from the letter. My thumb hovered over the green button for 10 seconds. Then I pressed it. He was expecting my call. He'd been waiting, in fact. He told me he'd been trying to reach me directly for months. But Victoria had intercepted every letter. She'd changed the contact information on file to her own. "The elder Mrs. Whitfield has been quite thorough," he said. "Her efforts to prevent this information from reaching you have been extensive." His voice was careful, precise, like a man who'd built his career on saying exactly what he meant. Nothing more. He confirmed everything the letter described. The unauthorized transfers. My beneficiary status. The 5th anniversary allocation. All of it hidden by Victoria for years. "What are my options?" I asked. "Many," Philip said. "But the most effective option is often the simplest one." "Which is?" "The truth," spoken clearly. In front of witnesses. I waited 4 weeks. I did not tell Aaron. Not because I didn't trust him. Though by this point I wasn't sure. How much of Aaron was Aaron? How much was Victoria's echo? I needed this to be mine. My moment, my truth, my voice were the longest of my life. Every Sunday dinner at Victoria's table felt like a performance. I passed the salt. I complimented the roast. I smiled at the stories I'd heard 17 times. I did everything exactly the way I'd always done it. But inside, I was counting days. The hardest part was looking at Aaron. He didn't know. He came home from the family office each evening. He'd talk about his day. The meetings. The paperwork. None of it meant what he thought it meant. He was living in a version of his family that didn't exist. And I couldn't tell him. Not yet. I slept badly. I dreamed about folders. About letters buried in drawers. About Victoria's handwriting. That precise, slightly pointed cursive. It showed up in every dream. Labeling things. Filing things. Hiding things. Mom checked on me every other day. Short calls. Never more than 5 minutes. She didn't ask for updates. She just said, "Still standing?" And I'd say, "Still standing." And that was enough. During those 4 weeks, I prepared. Philip and I spoke 3 times. And precise. I made them from the parking lot of the grocery store. Victoria would never think to look for me there. She had never once gone grocery shopping. The first call was about the facts. Philip walked me through every transfer, every unauthorized account, every shell company Victoria had created. The company name was Whitfield Legacy Consulting. It had a P, ooh, in a strip mall 20 minutes from the estate. No employees, no website, no phone number other than Victoria's cell. She invoiced the trust for consulting services, Philip explained. Quarterly payments, always under the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. She knew the exact number. She read the trust governance provisions very carefully. She did that before she started stealing from it. The second call was about strategy. Philip told me I had options. I could file a formal complaint with the state attorney general. I could initiate civil proceedings to recover the funds. I could report it to the IRS. Or, he said, you can do what your father-in-law would have done. What's that? Put it on the table. Let the family see it. And let them decide what kind of family they want to be. The third call was about timing. Philip confirmed he would be available by phone on Thanksgiving Day. He would clear his entire afternoon. In 30 years of practice, he said, I've never been on call for a holiday. Not for Thanksgiving dinner. But this one I wouldn't miss. I made copies of the letter. I gathered every document I could find in Aaron's home office. The statements that didn't add up. The transfer records with account numbers I didn't recognize. The consulting agreements with a company that had no employees and no website. It had no presence in any business registry. I copied everything on the printer at my office. After hours, the building was empty. The security guard waved at me from the front desk. He was reading a paperback. He didn't ask why I was there at 9. He never did. That's the thing about being reliable. People stop questioning you. The only sound was the copy machine and my heartbeat. And the hum of fluorescent lights that never quite turned off. Page after page. Transfer records. Account statements. Shell company documents. Each page came out warm. I stacked them neatly. I organized them by date. The way Mom would have done it. The way Dad would have expected. He put it all in a folder. A plain manila folder. Nothing fancy. No label. I held it in my hands for a long time. It weighed almost nothing, but it contained enough truth to change everything. The hardest part was acting normal. Sunday dinners. Phone calls with Aaron. A birthday card from Victoria. It said, to my daughter-in-law on the front. It contained exactly no warmth. And exactly 1 department store gift card. I smiled. I thanked her. I put the card on the mantle. It sat next to a photo of my parents at their own anniversary. And I waited. My mother came over the week before Thanksgiving. She drove 40 minutes in a car that needed new brakes. She wouldn't let me pay for the repair. My car. My brakes. My decision. That was Mom. Independent to the point of stubbornness. Stubborn to the point of principle. She brought her famous sweet potato casserole recipe. The one with the pecans and the brown sugar crust. The one she made every Thanksgiving since I was 6. The recipe was written on an index card in her mother's handwriting. The card was stained and creased from 30 years of use. She treated it like a sacred document. Because it was. She also brought a kind of calm, the kind that only comes from a woman who has survived harder things than this. She knew it too. Are you nervous? She asked. No, I said, which was a lie. Good, she said, which meant she knew. Remember what I told you. Let her finish. Then speak slowly. Never raise your voice. The quieter you are, the louder the truth sounds. Where did you learn that? I asked. From watching your father negotiate with his dispatcher for 31 years. He never raised his voice. Not once. And he never lost a single argument. I believed her. Dad was like that. The kind of quiet that wasn't weakness. The kind of quiet that was strategy. Thanksgiving arrived. I woke up at 5. The bedroom was dark. Aaron was still sleeping. He slept the way he always slept. On his back, hands folded on his chest. Like a man with nothing to worry about. I lay there staring at the ceiling. I thought about James. A man I never met. A man who sat on a loading dock and drank coffee. A man who put my name in a legal document years before he could have known it. I thought about Dad. A man who drove a truck for 31 years. A man who never raised his voice. A man who would have known exactly what to do with a manila folder. And a Thanksgiving dinner. I got out of bed. I showered. I stood under the water for a long time. Longer than usual. The morning was cold. The kind of November cold that makes you pull your coat tighter. You think about every warm thing you've ever been grateful for. I stood in my closet for 20 minutes deciding what to wear. Not because I cared about fashion. Because I cared about armor. I chose a navy blazer. Simple. Structured. The kind of thing you wear to a deposition, not a dinner party. My mother would have approved. My mother would have understood without me explaining. I put the letter in my purse. I zipped the purse closed. I checked it twice. Then I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. I said out loud to no one, "You are not a guest. You are not a visitor. You belong here." My hands were shaking. I held them together until they stopped. I drove to Victoria's estate with Aaron. He was quiet. He was always quiet before family events. The kind of quiet that I used to think was calm. But it was actually the silence of a man rehearsing obedience. He turned up the radio. Classical. Something with violins. It sounded like a soundtrack to someone else's more complicated life. "You okay?" he asked. "Perfect," I said, which was a lie wrapped in a truth wrapped in 4 weeks of waiting. The house was immaculate. Victoria had hired a decorating service for the front entrance. Wreaths, garlands, and a display of white pumpkins. They were arranged precisely. They looked like they'd been placed by someone with a level about symmetry. Inside, the table was set for a magazine photo. The heirloom china, the crystal wine glasses, the monogrammed linen napkins with the Whitfield W in gold thread, a turkey the size of a small car. Victoria claimed she'd cooked it herself, but I suspected it was catered. I'd seen the aluminum foil in the recycling bin from a restaurant I recognized. 4 side dishes, 2 desserts, a cheese board with selections she'd ordered online from 3 different states. She mentioned the shipping cost twice before anyone had even tasted them. She wore the cream cashmere. She gave her speech. She cut me from the family trust in front of 23 people. She looked at me and said, "This isn't personal. You understand." And I understood. I understood more than she could imagine. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the letter. And I stood up. The room was already quiet. Victoria had made sure of that. But the quality of the silence changed. It went from polite attention to something else. Something electric. Something alive. The grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. I could hear someone's fork settle against a plate. A small, metallic sound. The kind of sound that only exists in complete silence. Every pair of eyes was on me now. Not on Victoria. On me. The woman she just dismissed. The one who was supposed to look down at her plate. The way Aaron always did. "I do understand, Victoria," I said. My voice was calm. My hands were steady. Mom had coached me on this. Let her finish talking first, then speak slowly. Never raise your voice. The quieter you are, the louder the truth sounds. I understand that this trust was established by James Whitfield. It was created to protect this family's legacy. I understand that James specifically named me as a beneficiary. He believed I was part of this family. And I understand that you, Victoria, have been moving money. Approximately $1.4 million out of this trust. Over the past 3 years. Into accounts not authorized under the trust's charter. The room didn't just go silent. It went airless. Victoria's wine glass was halfway to her lips. It stayed there, frozen. I held the letter up so the table could see. "This letter," I said, "is from Philip Garrett. He is the estate attorney your husband chose to administer this trust. It was sent to me 4 months ago. You intercepted it. You buried it in a file in your son's office. You labeled the folder Tax Documents Archive. You knew no one would look there." I looked at Aaron. He was looking at me for the first time all evening. His face was white. "The letter confirms that I was named as a beneficiary of this trust. It was your husband's wish. It also confirms that $4 million has been moved without authorization. Philip Garrett can verify everything I've said. His number is on this letter. Anyone is welcome to call him. I set the letter on the table, in front of Victoria's cheese board. Then I sat down. The silence lasted exactly 6 seconds. I counted, then Margaret spoke. Victoria's sister-in-law. The one who'd always been just a little too quiet at family gatherings. Victoria, is this true? Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked like a fish pulled out of water. She couldn't understand why breathing was suddenly so difficult. This is Mia, doesn't understand the complexities of trust management. $1.4 million, Dorothy said from the far end of the table. Dorothy was 73. She had the hearing of a submarine sonar operator. That's not complex. That's theft. Nathan put down his wine. That's when I knew it was serious. Nathan hadn't voluntarily put down a glass of wine since 2019. That was at his ex-girlfriend's wedding reception. And that was only because he'd accidentally knocked it into the ice sculpture. The room was shifting. I could feel it. The way weather changes, not all at once, but unmistakably, people were looking at Victoria differently. The woman who'd set this table, who'd chosen this china, who'd ordered this centerpiece, she was still sitting at the head. But she wasn't leading anymore. Helen reached for the letter. Read the first paragraph. Passed it to Margaret. Margaret read it in full. Her lips moved. Her jaw tightened. She set it down and looked at Victoria. Like a schoolteacher who caught a child cheating, a test the teacher wrote herself. Victoria, Margaret said. Quiet. Steady. Tell me this letter is wrong. Victoria said nothing. Margaret nodded. The kind of nod that isn't agreement. It's confirmation of something you already suspected but hoped wasn't true. Aaron stood up. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at me. You've had that letter for how long? 4 weeks. And you waited until Thanksgiving. Your mother chose Thanksgiving to cut me out. I chose Thanksgiving to tell the truth. Fair is fair. Something shifted in his face. I couldn't tell if it was shame or recognition. Maybe it was the beginning of a very long conversation that would happen later. And it did happen later. In the car, on the drive home, 37 minutes of the most honest silence I'd ever shared with my husband. The car smelled like Victoria's house. And simmering resentment. We carried it with us. The way you carry smoke after a fire. You don't notice it until you're somewhere clean. And then it's everywhere. Aaron drove carefully. Too carefully. The way people drive when they're not really paying attention to the road. When their mind is somewhere else. Somewhere they don't want to look at directly. For the first 12 minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the turn signal and the tires on wet pavement. Then Aaron said, How long have you known? About the trust or about your mother? He flinched. Both. The trust, 4 weeks. Your mother, 4 years. Silence again. Mile marker signs flashing past in the dark. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know. Would you believe me or believe her? And? I still don't know, Aaron. You were looking at your green beans. He pulled over. Right there. On the shoulder of a 2-lane highway. He put the car in park. He put his hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Like a teenager taking his driving test. My mother said tonight. Every word you said. And I sat there. I just sat there. Yes, I'm sorry. I know. Is that enough? Not yet. But it's a start. We sat there for 11 minutes. I counted because I count things when I'm trying not to cry. A truck passed us. Its headlights swept across the car. For 1 second, I could see Aaron's face in the rearview mirror. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a sleep he didn't know he was in. The engine idled. The heater hummed. Outside, the trees were bare. November does that. Strips everything down to what's underneath. No leaves. No cover. Just the bones of the thing. Then Aaron said, My dad would be so ashamed of me. And that's when I cried. Not for me. For a man I'd never met. He tried to protect me from inside a filing cabinet. He already knew his own son wouldn't be strong enough to do it himself. Victoria tried to recover. She tried the only strategy she'd ever known. Control, denial, and the well-timed deployment of tears. I did what I thought was best for this family. James wanted Mia in the trust, Philip Garrett said. By phone? On speaker. I'd called him while Victoria was talking. He'd been expecting the call. We'd arranged it in advance. Mrs. Whitfield's actions are documented, Philip said. They will be addressed through the appropriate legal and fiduciary channels. His voice was calm, professional. Final? Victoria looked at the phone. She looked at me. She looked around the table at 23 faces. They were no longer looking at her with admiration or respect or fear. They were looking at her the way you look at a magician whose trick just failed. The audience saw everything. She stood up. She walked out of the dining room. She did not take her wine. She did not take her purse. She took nothing. It was a first for Victoria Whitfield. She left a room with less than she arrived with. That was 5 months ago. Philip Garrett initiated a full forensic audit of the trust. The forensic accountant was a woman named Linda Chen. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, the way a surgeon speaks about anatomy. With precision. With certainty. With the kind of calm that tells you she's seen worse. This isn't sophisticated, Linda said at our first meeting. This is someone who assumed nobody would ever check. The transfers follow a pattern. Same time of month. Always under the reporting threshold. Always to the same 3 accounts. The total amount Victoria had redirected was closer to $1. Set million. More than even the initial letter suggested. It went to personal accounts. It went to a vacation property in her name only. A 2-bedroom cottage on the coast. She told everyone it was a friend's place. It also went to a series of consulting fees. Those went to a company that consisted entirely of Victoria and a P.O. box. Linda found one transfer that was particularly telling. $18,000, dated 2 weeks after James's funeral. Before the casket flowers had even wilted. She started immediately, Linda said. There was no grieving period. At least not financially. On his loading dock with his coffee. Watching the trucks. Remembering how it started. A borrowed truck. A rented warehouse. A handshake with a man who believed in him. That's how James built it. One delivery at a time. One honest deal after another. And I thought about his wife. She was sitting at a desk somewhere, cashing checks. Checks drawn on the life he'd built. His name wasn't even dry on the headstone yet. The flowers from the funeral were still fresh. The sympathy cards were still on the mantle. And Victoria was already moving money. Already creating shell companies. Already turning grief into opportunity. That's the part that kept me up at night. Not the amount. Not the method. The timing. The fact that she started while people were still sending condolence cards. The trust board voted unanimously. Margaret was on the board. So were 2 outside advisors James had appointed before he died. They removed Victoria as trustee. Aaron was named interim trustee. He accepted on the condition that I be added as co-trustee. Included from the start, he told the board. My father knew that. I should have known it too. It was the first time Aaron had publicly contradicted his mother. And privately, between us, it was the beginning of something new. Notoreshet. You can't reset 5 years of silence. But a first step, the kind of step that says, I see what I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm here now. I didn't forgive him right away. Trust doesn't rebuild like that. It rebuilds the way you repaint a room, one coat at a time. Each coat needs to dry completely before you add the next. But he was trying. And trying counted for something. We started seeing a counselor. Every Wednesday. A woman named Dr. Park. She had an office above a bakery. The whole building smelled like bread. I liked that. There's something honest about bread. You can't fake it. It either rises or it doesn't. Aaron talked about his father for the first time. Really talked. Not the rehearsed version. The real one. The version where a boy loses his father at 22 and fills the absence with obedience to his mother. Because obedience felt like loyalty. And loyalty felt like love. Even when it wasn't. I talked about my parents. About the mailbox. About the front porch. About Dad's boots and Mom's filing system. About the way I was raised. To be quiet. To be patient. To wait for the right moment. And then to speak clearly. Park said we were both raised by good people. People who did their best. She said the challenge now was figuring out what best looked like for us. Not for our parents. For us. That's still in progress. But progress is its own kind of victory. Victoria was not charged criminally. The family chose to handle it privately. That meant Victoria lost control of the trust. She lost her seat on the family board. She lost the ability to write checks from an account that was never hers. She also lost her invitation to Sunday dinner. That was Margaret's decision, not mine. Margaret put it simply. If she can't be honest at Thanksgiving, she can't be trusted with meatloaf. The bridge club stopped calling. Dorothy told Helen. Helen told the rest. Within a month, Victoria's Thursday bridge game had been rescheduled. They moved it to a day nobody told her about. We didn't exclude her. Dorothy told me later over coffee. We just moved the meeting to a different house, on a different day, with a different phone tree. It's not personal. Dorothy stirred her coffee. Although it might be a little personal, Victoria moved out of the family estate 2 months after Thanksgiving. The move was quiet. No announcement. No farewell dinner. No speech rehearsed in front of a mirror. She hired movers on a Tuesday. They came and went in 4 hours. Margaret told me later that Victoria had packed her own boxes. That surprised me. Victoria had never packed her own anything. Not a suitcase. Not a lunch. Not a single box in 40 years. But she packed these. Carefully. Methodically. Each box labeled in that same precise cursive. The handwriting I'd learned to recognize. The handwriting that had filed away a letter meant for me. She left behind the hand-painted china. It belonged to the estate. The crystal wine glasses. The monogrammed napkins. The florist's number. She took her clothes, her personal photos, her cashmere sweaters, and a single cookbook that had belonged to James. Margaret noticed that. Nobody else did. She didn't sell it, she couldn't. It was trust property. She rented a 3-bedroom apartment in a town 30 minutes away. Nice enough. But not the estate. Not the house with the circular driveway and the heirloom china. Not the house with the florist whose name she mentioned 3 times per dinner. The last time I saw Victoria was at a family event 6 months later. Aaron's cousin's wedding. She arrived alone. She was wearing a navy blue dress, not cashmere, not cream. Something off a rack. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Something else. The kind of small that comes from losing the thing that made you feel big. She didn't speak to me. She didn't look at me. She stayed for 40 minutes. She spoke to Margaret briefly. And she left without eating. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel revenge. I felt something closer to sadness mixed with relief. Like watching a storm finally pass after years of checking the sky. I thought about what Mom always said. Revenge is a meal best, never ordered. Justice is the one that serves itself. She got that from a fortune cookie. But she said it with such conviction that it sounded like scripture. I watched Victoria walk to her car. She fumbled with her keys. I'd never seen her fumble. Victoria didn't fumble. Victoria didn't hesitate. Victoria never once showed a single crack in her composure. But that day, she fumbled. And I looked away, because some things are not mine to watch. I still work at the nonprofit. I didn't quit. I didn't retire. The trust allocation that James intended for me came through. It was $1. 2 million. Designated for my 5th anniversary. Just as the trust documents specified. It was more than enough to change my life. I used some of it to expand the nonprofit's legal services program. We hired 2 new attorneys. We opened a second office, used to be 40 minutes away. We now serve 3 times the families we used to. I go to work every morning. I park in the same spot. I walk through the door I help pay for. I sit at a desk that faces a window. The window looks out on a street where people carry their own folders, their own letters, their own truths they haven't spoken yet. I think about them. Every single one. Our waiting room has chairs I picked out. Comfortable ones. Not the fancy kind. The kind that say, sit down. Stay. We're here. We have a coffee machine that works most of the time. We have a receptionist named Diane. She remembers every client's name. She learned that from James. She doesn't know she learned it from James. But she did. Because kindness passes through people like light through a window. You don't always see where it started. Last month, a woman came in with a manila folder. No label. Nothing fancy. She'd been gathering documents for 6 months. Financial records. Letters. A journal of every conversation she couldn't prove but couldn't forget. From one of our attorneys. She said, I don't know if any of this matters, but someone told me to save everything. I was in the next room. I heard her through the wall, and I cried at my desk for the second time in my professional career. Victoria would probably call that Mia's little project. That's fine. My little project helped 200 families last year, including that woman with the manila folder. She's doing okay now. Better than okay. She sends us a card every Christmas. Handwritten, no fancy stationery, just a plain card from the drugstore. But the words inside are real, and real is worth more than fancy. I keep those cards in my desk drawer, next to the letter from Philip Garrett, next to the photo of Dad at his retirement party, next to a note Mom wrote me the week before Thanksgiving. It says, "Still standing." That's all. Just those 2 words. In her careful handwriting. Some people collect art. Some people collect wine. I collect evidence that people are good, that courage exists, can change everything. But I don't define my life by the money. I define it by the moment I stood up at that table. I spoke the truth in my own voice, in front of people who had watched me be diminished for years. They never said a word. I define it by my mother, who sat in her kitchen and told me to wait, who taught me that the quietest voice in the room can be the most devastating, who never once told me to be grateful for the crumbs from someone else's table. I define it by a man named James Whitfield, who I never met, a man who built a trust and put my name in it before he died. He believed that family is something you choose, not something you're born into. Aaron told me something last month. He said that in the weeks before James died, his father had been unusually busy, meeting with Philip, reviewing documents, making changes to the trust. I thought he was just being thorough, Aaron said, getting his affairs in order. But now I think he was building a safety net. Not for me, not for Mom, for the person he knew we'd need when he was gone. James never met me. He died 4 years before I married his son. But he read the trust provisions. He studied the beneficiary clauses. And he added a line. A single line. It said that if his son married, the spouse would be named as a beneficiary. At the 5-year mark, he built that door before he knew my name. He left it open because he trusted that his son would choose well. And Aaron did. It just took him a little longer to realize it than James had hoped. And I define it by the look on Victoria's face. She realized something in that moment. She'd spent 5 years trying to erase me, and I was the one person her husband had protected. That face. That frozen, wide open, completely exposed face. I don't replay it to feel powerful. I replay it because it reminds me of something. The truth doesn't need an audience to matter. But when it has one, it makes an impression. 23 people, the heirloom china, and a cheese board from 3 different states. Mom came over last Sunday. She brought pie, cherry, from scratch, including a lattice top. She said she learned it from a video online. But I suspect she's been perfecting it for longer than she'd ever admit. She also brought a framed photo of Dad, the one from his retirement party. He's holding a cake someone bought from the grocery store. He's smiling like a man who doesn't need a fancy bakery to feel celebrated. We ate it at my kitchen table, the one I bought with my own money, in a house I helped choose. In a life I'm building one careful decision at a time. You know what your father would say right now? Mom asked. She was licking pie filling off her thumb. What? He'd say, pass me another slice. And tell Victoria I said hello. I laughed. Mom laughed. And somewhere, I think Dad laughed too. If you're listening to this, I want you to know something. If you've ever been told, you don't belong at the family table, I see you. If you've ever saved a company $87,000 and all you got was a gift card, I see you too. The table doesn't define you. Who said it doesn't own you? Doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be clear. Come sit with me sometime. I'll save you a seat. The good one. Near the window. We'll use the regular plates. The ones without monograms. They work just fine.